I'm going to introduce our city manager, Bob Layton. Let's give him a warm Pachyderm welcome.
I want to talk a little bit about two things. First of all, I'm going to talk about what I think are some issues that will face the new city manager when that person hits the ground. And then I'm going to take my opportunity as a guy that's getting old and ready to leave and talk and reminisce a little bit about some things that happened in the 16 years that I've been here. And probably most importantly, talk about some of the people that I was blessed to work with as we try to move the community forward. And those are people that I consider to be visionaries, and I believe my role is to come alongside them and help them realize their dreams for the community and make sure they were consistent with what the community's values were. I will tell you that living in Wichita for 16 years has changed a little bit of my perception about what the role of government is. And although I wouldn't call myself a staunch libertarian, I would tell you that I have a lot more libertarian tendencies than I did when I first arrived. And I have really admired what the role of the private sector has been in this community, and frankly, the voice of Pachyderm and the members from over the 16-year period I've been here. We've had some really good discussions, especially when we've talked about budget and budget priorities. In fact, I led the group through an exercise several years ago that was really helpful as I was shaping my recommendations for the budget. So let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that the new manager is going to face. The first thing is the council's just starting an update of our economic development guidelines. And I will tell you, in the 16 years I've been here, and those of you who have followed City Hall know, our economic development policies have really changed over time. When I first arrived, if I remember correctly, the city gave a $10 million loan to Spirit for operations, and it was a forgivable loan. Those days are well behind us. We do not participate in economic development that way, and I think the council will continue to make our policy more conservative and make sure that we're helping businesses that really need the help to move forward, and that we're thoughtful in how we do that. But that's coming up over the next several months. Trying to tighten our operations in City Hall, continue to do that over time. Some of the new initiatives that the new manager is going to have to look at, or that will be he or she will be inheriting, is we're putting in place a brand new contract management system. We're putting in place centralization of our financial services, because right now they're distributed throughout the organization. And just because you can run a library well doesn't mean you can manage the library's day-to-day financial services. And so we're putting all of that in our finance department. New manager is going to have to work on a long-term financial plan for the city. I'm really proud of the way we came out of the recession. It was tough years. Those of you that remember those discussions, before I arrived, I was still in my previous community. I got a call from some staff members in Wichita, and they said, we're really looking forward to having you here. We just want you to know that when you arrive, which was the beginning of February, we are projecting we're going to have a $6 million deficit. And I said, well, but your fiscal year just started, it starts in January, right? And so that year we had a $6 million deficit. We had $8 million the year after that, and another $6 million for the third year. So we were in cutback management and really looked at how to change the way that we were doing business. But we got through the recession, we got through COVID, and I think we're in pretty healthy financial condition right now, but there are some storm clouds on the horizon, and so the new manager will have to work with staff to put a new financial plan together. Really proud of the fact that we're going to be building 2 new fire stations, one in the southwest and one in the northwest, to address growing needs for service in both of those areas. We are taking seriously the health threats for our firefighters. And if you followed what's happening with firefighters, they're exposed to more and more chemicals that are leading to a higher rate of cancer than any other employee group, but also really almost any other population in the community. So we've been teaming up with hospitals and the firefighters to get cancer screenings and to do some other things to keep them safe on the job. That will be another important initiative going forward. Many of you are aware of what we're doing in terms of what's called Second Light, or the multi-agency center for the homeless. The idea is not to create just a shelter, but to provide them with wraparound services so that if you're homeless in this community, you'll have an ability to get the services that are necessary for you to be to move into housing and be permanent in housing. The new manager will need to work on the third phase of that project, which is the construction of 50 supportive housing units, so moving people out of shelter into the supportive housing, and then 25 units of non-congregate shelter, which is for women and children, or families with children that are not comfortable in a current shelter environment. We're also testing a project that has worked really well in Dallas and Houston, and I'm really excited about it. And it moves people directly from encampments into housing. They skip the shelter piece of it. They still get services. They have to have active case management. We just took on, to kind of test this concept, we took on an encampment that had 11 homeless individuals. And within, I think it was a 60-day period, we found housing for all of those people. So this month, we are closing that encampment. We're taking steps with the property owner of that area so that no encampments move in after that. And then we're doing whatever we can to make sure those people stay successful in housing. That's a great model, and if you can make it work the way that the cities in Texas have made it work, then I think that would be a great accomplishment, and that will be an issue that you'll hear a lot about in the next year. We're also doing some things to make sure that we're really sound in the way that we manage our city operations and your dollars. Some of that has to do with making sure that our supervisors are much stronger in terms of how they manage our staff, and that we have appropriate succession planning in place so that as people leave the organization, a lot of us are aging out, that we have good qualified people that can move into the new positions. As you can imagine, we're putting a lot of resources into cybersecurity and a further enhancement of what we have in place now. We learned a lot, unfortunately, when we went through the hack last year. And I don't think any organization can ever say that they're fully protected. I think it's a dynamic process that changes all the time, and we're investing millions in our cybersecurity initiatives. But that'll be important. As you can imagine, we have a new water plant that's coming online in December. We have actually 2 teams of consultants that are helping us, including some assistance from the federal government, on making sure that we have up-to-date current cybersecurity in place, because bad players around the world have indicated that infrastructure is their target in the United States, and that includes water plants as well as energy plants. And so that will be something that the city will continue to invest in over the next year. As you know, the environment has changed in Washington, and that impacts the way that we spend our dollars as well as a lot of our policies. And so we went through a compliance review on the new federal regulations. That will be a dynamic process also, because we anticipate that we're going to continue to see changes in the way that that relationship between the federal government and local government works, and we need to make sure that we stay compliant. So we've got a team in place, and the next manager will have to make sure that team is strong and is monitoring what the changes are in DC and how we can comply. One of the things that's a pet of mine, and I think once I get into retirement I'll probably be dabbling in this a little bit, is community literacy, and especially early childhood literacy. One thing that I think could make Wichita a leader in this nation, if we do it right, is the education of our children before they get to kindergarten, and then the continued education and achievement in elementary school. There's a lot of information that's out that's really good research that talks about the likelihood of success for children that can achieve grade level in both reading as well as math at 3rd grade. And if they're behind in 3rd grade, you can pretty much predict they're going to be behind for a majority of their lifetime. And wouldn't it be fantastic if in our community we had a no child left behind approach, that by the time that we work with daycare facilities to get them the kind of education that they need to prepare them so all children are ready for enter into the elementary system and that they excel when they're in elementary school. That would create a fantastic workforce for us, and it really would make us so different than cities around the country, especially cities our size. So that'll be a challenge for the next manager, and I'll probably knock on that person's door a few times on that issue. We're continuing to work on improving our permitting process and our inspection process, especially in neighborhood inspections. We hear from neighborhoods a lot about problem properties, and I think we can do better in terms of the work that we do. At one point, I was frustrated that it took us so long to take a problem property and get it resolved. And so I asked, we have an office of process improvement and project management, and I asked them to map out the process. And it took they mapped it out, and it filled a long conference table in terms of all the steps in the process. And it was not uncommon to find a property that was 2 years after it was reported was still problematic. And the neighbors, of course, if you're living next to a property like that, you're not happy with that process. And so we've identified the pinch points and have started to improve. The next administration will need to work harder in terms of getting improvements in that area. Another issue that is not just here, but we read about it around the country, and it, I think will be an interesting challenge for the next manager, is affordable housing. I think there is a solution that is primarily private sector driven, that has some assistance from city government. Some of it financial, but a lot of it in terms of just determining how do we get out of the way for those who want to try to be successful. I don't know how many of you know Steve Philmeyer, former executive at Coke, who is retired, and he's taken this on as a mission to try to bring affordable housing. And he's raised $16 million from private sources to help with his initiative. If you get a chance and you're driving around on the weekend, go up 13th Street and turn onto Estelle, turn north on Estelle. In that 1400 block, Steve has got a small project. It's 5 manufactured or modular homes that he's put on lots adjacent to each other. And he can reduce the cost significantly. If I remember right, I think the cost of those units is about $125,000, which is substantially lower than a stick-built home, and I think is one of the possible solutions. Steve is looking at the possibility. He had to buy those from a manufacturer in Tulsa. He's looking at the possibility of building a factory here in Wichita and then turning out hopefully 100 or more homes a year that would mostly be at the affordable level. When you've got people like that are dreaming and thinking about a good private approach, I think it's incumbent on all of us to come alongside a person like that and say, what can we do to help that, and what other models are out there that will help us get more affordable housing. In the Plainview neighborhood, we're finally bringing a community center to that area. There's been a lot of advanced planning on that, and the next manager will be actively involved in the final plans for that and the construction of that building. We also are updating, along with our partners, Sedgwick County, we're putting together a new park and recreation master plan. And it's been a really interesting conversation at the council level, because there's a concern about the ability to sustain our system, and also to maybe be a little more pointed in the way that we that we spend our money in the park and rec system. And a thought that maybe we have too many small pocket parks distributed around the community, and maybe not enough money going into special parks that are more regional or larger in scale. I don't know where that's all going to come out. That's a discussion that the council will have with this team as well as the commission. But one of the things I'm really excited about is that the commission and the council have agreed that we're going to do more together in parks and recreation. And so we're going to start to see programming, more active programming in Sedgwick County Park, for instance. And there are 2 other park facilities that the county owns that we're going to try to maximize the use of those parks. It's, I think, a great partnership. We're also talking to partnerships with the county. We're going to be rolling out here pretty quickly a joint training facility, actually 2 training facilities that the city and county are going to share in order to be able to train our firefighters and make sure that they are training in a similar manner, because many times we're on calls together, and making sure that they're safe but also effective in what they're doing in the field. That will have to be fully implemented by the new manager. I don't know if you've heard from Joe Sullivan in the last year, but I'm really proud of the work that Joe's doing. He has a vision about a better use of technology and real-time data to be able to reduce crime in this community. We just announced last week, it was in the paper, that the Real-Time Crime Center or Information Center is open now. It monitors computer feeds, camera feeds, as I said, real-time data, all into a central location, and allows our police department to get to a scene of a crime quickly, and actually gives them the data they need to do predictive analytics, so that we are actually trying to look at our areas that are potential for high crime, and that we're assigning resources in advance to try to head off some of those hot spots in the community. We also are rolling out what's called drones as first responders. And so there's a pod in the Broadway corridor, there's a pod of 3 drones that we're experimenting with right now. And if we get a call within the range of those drones, a drone will go out and identify the situation from the air, which will allow us then to better determine what we need to deploy and where those people, our officers need to go. And if they start to run out of battery life, a new drone from that pod will come in. And so that's why you've got this pocket of 3 drones. So really excited about that. And again, I think Joe's vision has been pretty phenomenal for this community. We're also building a Patrol West headquarters or police building. And that, again, the new manager will have to supervise the final design and construction of that building. I talked about our water plant, and we are finishing up the commissioning of that, and at the very beginning of December, we should take that plant over. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of things to work on the early operations of that plant next year. Probably more exciting on the water front, one of the things that has helped us in terms of thinking about water differently was the long-term drought. The last time we went through a drought, we talked about the possibility of reuse, of taking sewage effluent and treating it and putting it back in the water system. At that time, the community wasn't really ready for that. After the drought we've been through now and looking at how low Cheney was getting, I think people now are looking are willing to look at other options. And so that's one of the things that we've entered into a study and we've been having discussions with our state leaders about change in regulations to allow us to roll out a system that would allow us to use that water back into our drinking water system. When people say, I'm not sure I want to drink treated sewage, I'm telling you, you're drinking it right now. It's probably been through at least 8 treatment plants upstream before it reached us. And so it's not a new concept, it's just a matter of how that water channels through the system. Our transit system is also going through some changes. There'll be some system redesign that will be implemented next year. And then the hub, which is the new transit center by the baseball stadium, will be opening next year as well. And hopefully right before the baseball season, so it can serve a dual purpose. So those are some of the things that are on the horizon, really just for the next year for the new manager. I wish that person well, because they'll have a lot on their plate. Before we get to Q&A, and Gary told me he would give me the high sign when I need to shut up, but I do want to talk a little bit about the last 16 years and some things that have happened in the community, and I want to just celebrate the people that helped kind of envision these changes and that I had the joy to work with. The first person is actually Carl Brewer. When I came to town, and if you remember, those of you who have been around for a long time will remember, Carl did not vote for me to be the city manager. And we had multiple visits about that. And in fact, he and I had a one-on-one interview as part of the process. And he said, you seem like a nice enough guy, but I need to change the face of downtown. Downtown is dying, we've got to do something different, and I don't have time for you to learn the job and do this. So I said, give me a chance and I'll do what I can to help you. He didn't vote to give me a chance, but he did give me a chance once I got here. And Carl was a visionary in that regard. He knew what successful downtowns looked like around the country. He knew we could be that way. And so he drove an effort to get the right people in the room to talk about downtown redevelopment. And then I was so fortunate to come right after Jeff Floor got here. So between Carl and Jeff, they were able to put together a downtown master plan. When I arrived, for every public dollar that was put in downtown, there was only $1 of private investment. And part of that was a little bit because of Intrust Bank Arena, but overall there was not healthy investment. If I remember the numbers right now, I think we're more at a 15-to-1. For every public dollar, I think it's $15 of private investment. That's what a healthy downtown looks like. That's what a healthy community looks like. And so I was really privileged to come alongside both of those individuals as they came up with the vision for a downtown. And then we put together a plan for implementation of the master plan after it was adopted. I also was really fortunate to be able to call this next person a friend, but he was a real game changer for this community, and that's John Bardo, who was president of WSU. John had a vision for the innovation campus and what the role of the university should be in terms of fostering research and development and providing opportunities for students to come alongside the private sector and work while they're students, and then have the opportunity to then work in these same high-tech companies after they get out of school. And John would tell me about this, and then I think he thought I was a slow learner, so he and I went to North Carolina State, and I saw what they had done there with their innovation campus. And John said, I love what they've done, but it's way too slow. And he used to tell me always, he said, Bob, I'm in my 70s, this is the end of the road for me, and I'm just gonna keep pushing until somebody says stop or they fire me. He said, but we gotta go at a breakneck pace because that's important to the community. So just look down the road. I think if John were alive today, he would be shocked at how quickly his vision was realized and how much has happened at the innovation campus. John also played a role in this next project, and that's the Advanced Learning Library. First of all, I'm going to give a tremendous amount of credit for the vision of that facility to Cindy Berner, who was our library director. And she understood that libraries were not just a place to store books, but understood that, and they were more even than community gathering places. They were a place where people can learn in a new and different way. And so the Advanced Learning Library, again, we had, if you remember, we had a very robust discussion, especially at the council level. Now County Commissioner Meitzner kept saying, I think I need everything I need I can get here. And it was like, no, it's much more than that. So in steps, as we're still wrestling with that, in steps John, and he says, hey, as long as we're at North Carolina State, I want you to see the Hunt Library. And that's, again, that's what opened up my eyes to it being a collaboration area, and an area, the building was full of computers. When I first walked in, I could not find a single book. They had put the books in really a kind of a warehouse next to the library, and then they had an electronic robot system that picked books. And if you were a student and you were on a bus coming to the library, you could get online, you could order your book, and the book would be waiting for you at the front desk. And so you didn't need to spend an enormous amount of time in the library trying to find materials. Anyway, it was, so John, once I saw that, I was a true believer, and I was really proud of what we did with the Advanced Learning Library. And I think if you travel the country, you'll see that we're one of the premier libraries in this country in terms of what is offered in our building and how it serves the community's needs and how it plugs into especially that issue of literacy from early childhood all the way to adult literacy, which is so important. We're leaving too many people behind in terms of adult literacy, and we can improve their ability to get jobs if we can come alongside them and help. Airport. Victor White was our airport director. He had a vision for what a new airport should look like. And I came to town and I said, I really love your vision. And I looked at the project pro forma and I said, we can't build this. We don't have enough revenue coming in. And he didn't like that answer. And I mean, if you're a visionary, you don't want people to tell you no. So to his credit, what he did is he worked with some business leaders and with our congressional delegation and with the governor at the time. They all got into a plane and along with Mayor Brewer, and they went down to Dallas, and they had a meeting with the CEO of Southwest Airlines. And they were able to convince Southwest to make an investment to come to Wichita. At that time, they agreed that they would do a backstop for the first couple of years if they were not successful. Well, if I remember right, I don't think Southwest ever had to ever take any money out of that backstop. They were successful, and it was against their corporate philosophy to try to get revenue guarantees at that time, but they thought we were a little higher risk, and they were wrong, which was great. Once Southwest announced they were going to come here, that gave us enough revenue for us to be able to build an airport. And now I think it's a gem in the community, and I hear so many positive things. I don't know, maybe you heard this story from other sources, but I know of a business person who had not been to Wichita for a few years, got off the plane and actually thought that he had been on the wrong plane and had arrived in a different city, and so he had to go to the gate and the gate staff to ask, "Is this really Wichita?" And really, again, I'm so proud of that facility. I'm also proud of the Equity Bank Stadium, and I know that has had some controversy, but again, that comes back to a vision that Lou Schweckheimer had, who was the owner of the New Orleans baseball franchise, came to Wichita, fell in love with the community, and said, I'd like to bring my team here, but I'm not going to play in the current baseball stadium. We can't do that. It doesn't meet the standards for professional baseball. So we worked hard on trying to make that work. But again, Lou's vision and his constant drive, he was on that site almost every day that it was under construction, making sure that everything was done right and in a way that we could be proud of. Again, he also understood that you don't just build a baseball stadium because there's a limited interest in baseball, it's a limited season, but it's what you do in the stadium outside of baseball, and more importantly, what happens outside the walls of the baseball stadium. And as you've seen, EPC is moving forward with its private development adjacent to the stadium. George Layham, local developer, has control of ground north of the stadium, and I think 5 years from now, that area may not be recognizable because of the amount of development around it. I also want to give thanks or shout out to Alan King, who was our longtime Public Works and Utilities Director, and his vision for a new water plant. We have one of the most advanced water plants in the country. The only thing it can't do is desalination, but in terms of the rest of we have the ability to do that with this plant if we want to make that conversion at some point. But again, it was Alan's drive, his ability to put together a team and help work the pro forma and help us work the federal sources. Because I'll tell you, half of that building was built at low interest, with low interest loan money from the federal government. Without that, I don't think we as ratepayers would have been able to afford that plant. Second Light, Sally Stang, who's our housing director, she's the one that came up with the concept of the multi-agency center and said we have to just we can't just keep putting people in shelter and let them live in encampments and expect different results. And so I know you've all heard a lot about that. I think, again, a year or two from now, we're going to realize the full impact of Second Light and hopefully get closer to zero, to functional zero in terms of homelessness. We're almost there with homeless veterans. We're almost to the point where we're at functional zero with homeless veterans. Now let's see if we can't get successful with the rest of the population. I also have been blessed with another Wichita State visionary, and that's Rick Muma. Rick's vision for the Biomed Center, his ability to form a partnership with KU, that's transformational for this community. For the 16 years I was here, that I've been here, I kept hearing we need to diversify our economy. We can't be so dependent on aviation. And we'd all say, yeah, we know that, but nothing really fell into place. Look at what's going to happen now in biomed. As soon as the doors open, or shortly after, 3,000 students are going to be downtown every day going through that center, and 300 faculty members. And they're going to be learning in a state-of-the-art environment, and not just in terms of medicine, but in nursing and possibly in dental, and all of the other biomed services that surround that. And people are starting to buy up property around that facility so that they can then convert those buildings into research labs, into support offices. ComCare has announced they're going to be in that campus. I think we're going to see a lot of changes, and I do think a strong diversification in our economy. And then the last thing is, I don't know, this is a name that many of you probably don't know, Brian Sykes. Brian is now the CEO of Cargill, but he was in charge of the North American protein division for Cargill, and which is located here. Cargill was seriously looking at leaving our community, and it was shortly after Spirit had announced a significant number of layoffs, and so had Textron. And so we were kind of down as a community at that time. Our economy was not very strong, and Brian made a conscious decision not to take a more attractive offer from Plano, Texas, but to stay here and make the investment in the facility that's now in Old Town. That was a turning point. I felt a difference in the community's psyche, so to speak, the way we talked about ourselves. People seemed to be a lot lighter and more optimistic when that happened. Selfishly, I liked it because it was a great bridge between Old Town and the Arena District, and that was one of the last missing pieces that we had, and it really helped with the downtown as well. But Brian was one of those people that had a vision for Cargill in this facility, but also a vision for the community. And again, it was a pleasure to be able to come alongside him and help that become a reality. So those are just some of the things that as I reflected back on the last 16 years that I've thought about. I would love an opportunity to have a dialogue or answer questions. And Gary, are we about ready?
Yes, sir.
All right.
So we're going to have questions, and keep your hands high. We'll try to get to our members first, and let's get to it. And you can answer questions.
Sure.
Right
Yeah.
We don't throw anything at you or anything.
You haven't in the past, so yeah. Bob Weeks almost did one time, but yes.
Mr. Layton, last week I came to the Pachyderm Club and I got in a discussion with somebody as to whether there's parking meters or whatever you want to call them, parking signs on Topeka, and I said no, there wasn't anywhere I park. And when I left, sure enough, there are signs, but they're spaced out.
Yeah.
If you don't park in front of one of those signs, how can you be held responsible if you don't know that there's the signs there?
Yeah, I think my easiest response on that is this is a work in progress. Part of it is we have to do a better job in education, and then part of it is, and education is not just in terms of what we do with our social media posts and everything. I think we need to listen to those kind of comments and be more responsive on what we do with signage. So we're still working through some of that. You're not the only person that has expressed some concerns about that. Also, I think we're still having some problems with the app. I know that some people have tried to put a credit card into the app and store it, and it hasn't taken it. I'm one of those people, and so I had to use a second credit card to get in the system. So we're working through that with the provider as well to work out the bugs. But those kind of comments are really important to us so that we have a usable system.
Okay, question
Yep.
back here, boss?
Yeah.
You talked to the group about the new Wichita identification card and who it's for and who benefits and why it might be better than the state issue ID.
Yeah, I don't know that it's better. It's probably more accessible to especially our homeless population. We've been surprised at the number of people that have come in, and they're not coming in necessarily on their own. They're being brought in by a provider. And I've listened in on some of their stories, and they'll talk about how someone stole their wallet or their backpack, and they have no ID at all and no way to prove their residency or the fact that they've been in this community. And that it doesn't doesn't allow you to vote, it doesn't give you, certain rights that you're not entitled to. But even just cashing a check, if someone gets a Social Security check, they can't do that at a bank without some kind of ID. So that's what I'm finding is the providers are bringing a lot of our homeless individuals in. I think we've issued close to 1,000 cards, if I remember correctly. The number's getting up there, and so there was a need. That for some reason, and maybe it's just in terms of accessibility, that the state ID didn't work.
Okay, another question right here?
Actually, I think, mine will be more about comments, because I think I was at the introduction when, as in the Realtors Association, when you became the city manager, after you had a brand new green real estate agent in '09. That'd be about right?
That's exactly right. And I was a brand new green city manager.
So. Excited. I wanted to give feedback though, because you're talking about the person who's coming after you. Because this, John Todd will tell you, Carl Peter John will tell you, this has been my wheelhouse before I got on the state board. So first to the education, we do not do what we're supposed to be doing right. The last thing we need to do is grab the babies out of the crib and start doing it wrong earlier. Because, and I'll tell any of you, the Vanderbilt study, we are harming, the way we're doing it in public education, according to the Tennessee Vanderbilt study, we are harming our pre-K kids. So we need to figure out what we're doing wrong and fix that before we keep harming them. So that's on the education stuff.
Sure.
But to the city stuff, you're not going to fix things until you fix your GIS mapping. I've talked to Carl, this is how Carl and I met. Your GIS mapping is wrong. And the city is selling remnant properties that do not belong to them because 26-201 Kansas statute says that the city cannot own by fee simple property condemned for street use. I've had to, and I have a contract where I had to purchase my own street condemned property back from the city. So the city needs to clean up what it's doing there. The Places for People, John and I worked a long time together. Where is he over there? On Places for People, I was disturbed because the misinformation, they had a map from the 1920s, 30s on redlining, and they were presenting this to the realtors as if this was a common practice now, not legal.
Oh, no.
That's how they were presenting it to us. John was with me. And so I don't have a question. I have comments I want you to take to your new guy, because this was disturbing to me, all of these things. So I just, the continual, I was so excited when I first heard you, and I'm just so disappointed that I can keep coming for 6 years to the city and try to fix these things, and no one hears it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Real brief response on some of those. I'd love to visit with you regarding what to do right with children, especially before they get to K, because I do think that's really important, and I'd love to hear about your thoughts on that. The GIS, I haven't heard that before in the fee simple titles, so I'll bring that back to the staff. And then the last one is Places for People. The council is actually going to start discussions about that plan. Many of them were not in office at the time it was adopted. I think they want to get acquainted with it and then talk about the implementation. So you'll have an opportunity to participate in that discussion. I think we start a workshop at the end of this month, but then it will be continued when the new manager is here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right here?
Yeah.
I wonder what is up with the plan to change so many of the 4-lane city streets into 2-lane streets with wide bicycle lanes. My observation is that 95% or more of the traffic is cars and not bicycles in Wichita. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. That goes back to a process that when they put together the bike and pedestrian master plan, it went through a lot of citizen engagement. I know there are a lot of people that don't agree with that concept. And by the way, it's technically we're going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes because you have but you have the middle turn lane. Yeah. So I've had this discussion with a number of people. It's a policy issue. I'd urge you to continue to talk to mayor and council about it because I think we have reduced the number of streets that originally planned for those conversions, and we just there was one out east where we worked with a school and a number of people in the neighborhood, and we actually went back to a 4-lane model instead of that 3 with bike lanes. So council's open to that discussion. It just, I think it's situational where it is. So, thank you. Yeah.
I want to thank you for your service over the last 16 years. Is that how long it's been?
Yeah.
I was on the team along with Celeste Rousseau, who's here, that took a look at the city's finances recently. And I'm glad, and we're glad to hear the couple of things that came out of that study. You have addressed a little bit. The centralization of the financial department was one of the things that we saw as a miss. And then also that you're going to be, you said tightening operations. One of the questions I have, or it's a question, is regarding the management of processes. We noticed that there was not a consistent process across the city, and hopefully that's being addressed in what you're talking about. And then also the enforcement of CID payments, the taxes collection that weren't happening. So who was responsible? Was there a process in place, and who's responsible for that getting collected that wasn't getting collected? I guess my question is regarding who's responsible for managing projects currently, and is that going to be something that you hope is going to get changed?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Let me answer the question that you didn't ask first, and that is, what are we doing with that plan? And what I don't even know that I've talked to Celeste about this, but I've asked our city auditor to head up a team to look at all the recommendations of the plan and then come back with our thoughts and responses on the recommendations that we'll then provide to the council and have available publicly. And so that will be done again, be finished by the time the next manager comes in, and that person will have to decide how to move forward with implementation. But I think it's, if I remember right, it's there's like 3 core staff members that are working on it, and then expertise from the departments that were impacted by your recommendations. So that's, it's not been disregarded by any means, but it's actually being reviewed, and we're making recommendations. In terms of systems changes, the contract management is maybe one. Again, Celeste and I have talked about that. When you go to a distributed model, a model where it's decentralized, it's only as strong as the people in each of those departments. And I've been frustrated somewhat by contract management for a while, and so we tighten up in one department, but then you suddenly find out you've got problems in another department. So not only are we centralizing it, but we've identified some software that will allow us to enter in every contract that the council approves or that we enter into as staff, what the main requirements are, and then it flags all obligations. So whether that is an increase in fees that we pay or that someone else owes us, that will all be flagged by that system. And that'll be implemented again early on in the tenure of the new manager. I just gave approval to the contract module or the contract software on Tuesday. And so we're in the process then of bringing the contract to the council for that. So I agree with you. I mean, I think we have a lot of strong systems in place, but I also think we have some internal weaknesses that have to be addressed, and we're working on that.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Manager, for your years of service. We really appreciate it, especially 2 years that I spent working with you at the city.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
I have a question for you regarding the scope of responsibilities of our new city manager. We've heard from our mayor calls for a more balance between council and our city manager. Do you expect a decrease in roles and responsibilities for our next city manager, or how do you anticipate that balance to be held?
Boy, I'm really sorry we're out of time, Gentry. I would have loved to answer that question, but
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right, Bob. No,
That-
go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
thanks. The council's weighed in that they are supportive of the council manager form, generally as it exists now. The form of government has evolved over time throughout the country, and there are cities that have all variations on that theme. We've had this form of government basically as it exists for over 100 years. We were an early adopter in 1917, and I think it served the community pretty well. But the way a manager operates today, even without a change in charter or any responsibilities, is very different than a manager even when I started in the business. It used to be the manager says this and the manager does this and the council never crosses into that area, and it was really, frankly, not a healthy partnership. And it created a lot of tension that was unnecessary. And I think there's a much more collaborative approach today between the manager and the elected officials. And anyone who's watched the government work knows that even though there's continuity in administration, the direction is still set by the mayor and council. Go to a council meeting. This council especially doesn't rubber stamp what they get. They're thoughtful in terms of reviewing the policy recommendations, the impact, and many times will send us back to the drawing board to work on things. And that's what you expect, it should look like. But ultimately, it won't be my decision where we go, but I think I appreciate the question, so.
We did that pretty quick.
Yeah.
We got another question for you.
Good morning here, Bob. Thank you.
Hi, John.
Housing. We seem to want people to comply with send out inspectors versus doing consultation, putting people together with resources, rather than just bulldozing and hauling houses to the landfill. Do you think there's a possibility that we could form something that people on title and some of the things that the inspectors are not good at, to save houses that will be fixed into low-cost, quality houses instead of demolishing?
So I'm going to challenge a little bit of your assumption, John. First of all, if it's a paint up, fix up, somewhat some property maintenance concerns, we do have those resources. In fact, we match needs with volunteers who've said they were church groups and others who are willing to help. And many times we're trying to help elderly stay in their homes. And so we do. Actually, I have 2 people on staff that work on that. In terms of demolitions, this is not the same as it was 10 years ago. If you look, very few demolitions are actually coming to the council. Most demolitions are on a voluntary basis where the property owner has said, I don't have the resources and I don't think this house can be saved. Very different than what it was. We had a very aggressive demolition schedule when I arrived, and probably the first 5, 6, 7 years I was here. We've changed that, and I think a lot of more people are putting resources into rehab and recognizing, especially in today's market, if I can put X number of dollars into a rehab, that's better than trying to build for 3 times the cost and a brand new. And we all know because of that, we get a vacant lot. We don't get a new piece of housing. So I think generally speaking, you're on the right track. And I talked to you about Steve, who's working on affordable housing. He's also looking at a rehab component, not just putting new houses on vacant lots.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah, I'd like to know a definition of affordable housing.
Yeah.
Median income in Wichita, 63,000. So does that include so many square feet? Does it include Section 8? Where does affordable housing, you always mention affordable housing.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, so I don't know that I have the exact definition that my staff would. My simple version is that if you are below the median income level, I think it's usually like 120%, if I remember right, something like that, up to 120% of median income. So it's a pretty wide range. You should be able to put, 30% of your income into housing, if I remember. So basically, what Steve is doing at a $125,000 home is today's starter home. That same home, stick-built, is going to cost almost $200,000, which means you've got that substantial gap that nobody's going to be able to afford to fill. These starter houses are smaller than you and I had as starter homes. You're probably dealing with maybe 1,000 square feet with some of these models. But it's getting people into safe housing, and in some, you're providing them an opportunity to build equity, which that is all about wealth building, and that door has been shut to so many people in our community. Have Sally Stang come here, and she'll give you the numbers, and have Steve come and talk, and he'll be able to tell you in, I think, better terms than I can as kind of a person just dabbling in it. So. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Looks like the drawers are being